getting the Facebook Live people on, and we're trying to just resolve that little tech issue right now. All the YouTube is on and all the rest of it. We're just trying to make sure we can get the Facebook folks on. And if that doesn't happen in the next 30 seconds, we're just going to go ahead and get started. But give us just a couple of seconds and we'll get rocking and rolling. Hi there, Tim. You can wave. Say hi, Tim. You're showing up as Andy, by the way, just FYI. I'm sure you probably know that. We'll unmute you in a minute.
Maybe Tim Yandel, maybe you've been calling him Tim all these years and his name's really Andy.
Yeah, unfortunately not. I know Andy, and she's far better looking.
Eric, is it connected?
Yeah, we're all good to go now.
Okay. Perfect.
All right, let's get rocking and rolling then.
Tim, do you want to open up?
Sure.
Okay.
Of course, it'd be nice if I knew the number. Do you know the magic number?
Probably 434, maybe.
We'll go with that.
Yeah. Give or take 102.
Today is.
Hold on. Go ahead.
All right, we'll get it there now. See, we do miss Jim after all. Today is June 22nd, and this is the All the Leads podcast number. What did you say? What?
Probably 434.
434.
Winston knows.
Just a quick update from Jim. I just heard from him a little bit ago, and this is a bit ironic for those of you who know Jim and love him as we do. Jim is on his way to the Blarney Stone at the moment. All we need is for him to be more glib. So he's in Ireland, and they put into Cork this morning on their Ireland tour, and so they're on their way to the castle, Blarney Castle, to see the Blarney Stone. So he's having a great time, and we've seen a lot of pictures from him as he's over there, and he's enjoying his journey. So as always, Bruce Hill is here, and I'm here, and I think Kelly Ladeke just joined us as well. She's here. Don't know if Cameron is here yet. And we're ready to rock and roll, Bruce. Go make magic, buddy.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We are right smack dab in the middle of Prospecting Mastery this week. For those who haven't taken it, I believe there's going to be another chance in about a month to take Prospecting Mastery. If you haven't done so, please sign up for that, especially if you are a phone prospector. This call is hosted by All the Leads, and it's our mastermind call. So if you're listening live, welcome. If you're listening after the fact on YouTube or podcast, we welcome you guys in as well. We do this live on Zoom because it gives our subscribers and non-subscribers, people that are in the probate niche, an opportunity to come in and talk about their successes, talk about their best practices, ask questions. We have several coaches here. So ask questions about how to prospect, how to market, how to build a awareness and credibility, how to structure deals, lots of good stuff that you guys are going to get here. So if you are here live, what I want to ask you guys to do is raise your hand with any questions. I see Dwayne's hand is up already. I always like it when I get questions early so I don't have to ramble and bore you guys. So please ask your questions, raise your hands with those questions and success stories, not only questions, but also success stories. If you're on YouTube or Facebook watching the live stream, all you have to do is go underneath of that live stream and chat your question in. It's going to come over to a channel that we're monitoring, and we'll answer your question right here on the call. Because I'm in the middle of Prospecting Mastery class this week, I personally am going to have a hard stop here in about 52 minutes where I'm going to have to jump off. So if anybody's question is still outstanding, unfortunately, I'm going to have to jump off in a little bit and go to that class. But you got 52 minutes to get your hands up now, chat your questions in. If anyone's ever looking for probate leads or marketing systems, specifically websites, direct mail marketing, anything like that, All the Leads handles all of that. So if you're looking for a place to get probate leads where you don't have to haul yourself down to the courthouse all the time, and it don't have to be an expert skip tracer and writer of letters and all those things, we can handle it for you. And that's the only commercial that I'm going to give you guys today. We're here to help you all. So with that said, let me jump over to Dwayne. Thank you for asking a question so soon, and have you unmute yourself. And Tim, did you were you going to talk to Tim?
Yeah, we can go ahead and take Dwayne's question, and then as soon as you're done with that, kick it back to me, and I'll introduce Tim Tolbert and what he's going to talk with us about today.
Sounds good. Dwayne Olson, how are you?
This is right up against what you were just saying about your part 2 class this afternoon. The question I have is, do we just pull the same link that's on the calendar for yesterday?
No, nope. You'll pull. There's a link on a calendar invitation for you today, Dwayne.
Okay. Haven't been in here long, so I haven't looked.
You're good. You should have a link for today. I'll make sure that you have it here in a minute if you don't already.
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Okay,
it.
perfect. All right. Thank you, Dwayne. Appreciate you. And Tim, let me kick it back over to you.
Okie doke. So, Bruce, let me see. Andy, Tim, I'm asking you to unmute yourself now. So you need to do that so we can hear your lovely voice. And I see you've done that. Tim Tolbert has been a friend of mine for a long time. We've been previous business partners in various ventures, and I always refer to him as my family and friends' favorite mortgage broker. He's done transactions for pretty much everybody that I've known over the period of the last couple of decades. And he's one of the most knowledgeable people that I've ever met in regard to mortgage lending, and always seems to find a great way to get things done for people that need to get dealt with in both a creative way and people who need to get the best rates. So he can work kind of both ends of the spectrum, and that's sort of what we look at as well. People who need to sell quickly, and also people who want to list and get the most they can for it. So I was talking to him last week, and he mentioned a type of lending that I frankly didn't know anything about. And I'm sure most of you have heard of it, but he gave me some good info on it. So I just asked him to kind of come on today and maybe talk a little bit about kind of what's going on in the mortgage lending world, not just here in kind of the Southeast, but all over the country. And so if you've got questions about mortgage lending or any of that sort of stuff, you can certainly ask, and Tim will be able to come up with a good answer for you. And he's also a great mortgage broker. And if he can't get you done in a state that you're in, he can probably find somebody to help you for things that you need there. There's nobody better. And with that, hey, Tim, how you doing? Can't hear you if you're talking.
I muted it. I muted myself too. So can you hear me now?
Hear you now.
Okay.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
So when we were talking the other day, the question that kind of started our discussion, I asked you, what's going on in lending right now, and where's money coming from? Where is it hard to get, and all of that? And you kind of told me about what's going on with in the world of Fannie Freddie, and also debt service coverage. And I want to talk a good bit about debt service coverage, but can you give us, to start with, just a little bit of perspective about what's going on in mortgage lending in general, and then let's talk about debt service.
Well, I mean, everybody's probably heard it a bunch of times, and people tend to freak out because the media blows it up more than it actually is. But rates obviously for the last year or so have been climbing. Funny part is they climbed up, and now since the Fed slowed down their increases, the banks now and investors now know what their margins are. So they kind of like from September, say October to now, they've actually calmed down. But they're still higher than they were obviously a year and a half ago. But one thing that's happened in that time frame, and you discussed Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae, with all the people investing in or buying second homes and turning them into Airbnbs and all this stuff, in the interim, Fannie Mae's like, well, all these people are making all this money and we're not getting a piece of it. So what Fannie Mae did is they increased their loan level pricing adjustments, which means the amount that they charge you in the back end that you don't get to see, they basically increased your rate. So their margin is bigger. So they're taking a little piece of that. But nice part about it is, and I've discussed this with Tim, is, there's Fannie Mae will let you have up to 10. They've become very investor friendly. So basically, if you qualify for your properties as the way you stand based on your income, and you're acquiring another property that cash flows based on annual rental rates, which is what you should be using for, as a cushion. And honestly, if it doesn't qualify under those terms, you probably shouldn't be buying it. But Fannie Mae will allow you to use literally that asset to qualify for the loan. So and I'll give you an example, and this is just going to be easy numbers, it's not reality. So if you have a rental of $1,000, which I don't think anybody sees that unless they're in certain areas of this country, but in Florida, good luck even getting $1,000. But if your mortgage payment is $750 and it rents for $1,000, that has a zero effect on your personal debt ratio because the property will afford to pay for itself. Back in the day, until you had investor experience, Fannie Mae would hit you with both of those. So you had to be able to carry your current debt load plus the new property as if you didn't have any income coming off of it. So because of evolution of their system and their programs, they now are looking and say, okay, the people who didn't take it on the chin when the market crashed the last time were the people who had significant amount of real estate assets to offset those that weren't paying. So they're like, oh, well, we need to go back to that. So now they're going back to allowing up to 10. Cool thing, if you have a spouse and you both have income, that 10 can turn into 20 because 10 are financed in one person's name, 10 are financed in the other. So if you qualify for that, that's going to be your best pricing. But what you'll find out in the industry is pricing is irrelevant. Availability of funds and speed of funds is the most important thing. Because honestly, the difference in rate between Fannie Mae and the debt service coverage ratio that I'm going to go into now is only like 1/4 to 3/8%. Put that in perspective on the house that I'm refinancing right now, because which is using delayed financing, was a whole different thing, but I'm doing it on a DSCR. I can qualify for a Fannie Mae. I just don't want to deal with the headaches documenting it for 3/8 of a point, because it's literally on my loan, 3/8 of a point makes about a $35 a month difference versus dealing with 2 years worth of tax returns, all kinds of paperwork, all kinds of documents, dealing with, potential declining income. There's all kinds of things that you have to deal with versus on a DSCR, it's appraisal, assets, credit score. That's it. Other than clear title and insurance, that's it. They literally use the asset. And I mean, and it sounds familiar to those who have dealt in commercial world before. It's the exact same principle that commercial world uses to qualify people for loans. Does the asset carry itself? If it does, they do the loan. So that's the nice part about it, is you don't have to, especially for those of us investors, and I am an investor. I've been an investor for 20. Let's see, my instructions are, our standard is now to say just 20 plus, but it's been more than that. Because my wife doesn't want to feel older, so we stop at 20 plus. So whatever. But knowing the rules to the game can help you. So if your DSCR is going to cost you 7.5 on these properties, on all these probate deals that you're finding, how many of them are keeping them? How many of them are wholesaling them? And if you have a plan in place to keep them, the profits that you get out of them in the long term far eclipse the money that you're going to get them in flipping the property. So, for example, I'll give you an example of the one I've got now. The one I have in North Georgia, I just bought and did a DSCR in it. My cash flow on that one is $1,000 a month. So if you would have flipped that property and made a $25,000 profit, I'd be there in 2 years or 2 years and 2 months. But I still get to keep that money coming in because I didn't sell it. I kept it and portfolioed it. DSCR is very subjective from lender to lender. So you need somebody that understands and has multiple lenders, because I have multiple lenders. And one of my lenders sent me a message, hey, by the way, we've lifted our regulations now. We can literally do an appraisal and use appraised value immediately. So say you buy one, you got a sweet deal, you buy it cash, get owner finance, get whatever, it doesn't matter. However you do it, owner, private money, you name it, however you gain asset ownership to that property. If you improve that asset or if there's a reason for you buying it at X dollars and then it being worth Y dollars, and the appraiser documents that, and the value and the true value is Y, they will let you cash out up to 65, 70%. Usually 70 is the threshold that you want to stay within. You can go higher, but the rate gets worse, but 70 seems to be that sweet spot. But if you pull 70% out of a $200,000 house, that's $140,000. That will more than likely cash flow depending on your market. So, and that's just a round number. So, and at the same time, if you bought it based on, fix and flip figures, you can literally get 100% of your, you can literally get into that property when all the dust settles for minimal to no money. After it all, you can get all your money back and then repeat. So, I mean, they've literally structured it that way because they know, worst case, if they have to take that property back, that property back is going to cover the note.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they care about. Think of it from a lender standpoint. If you loan money, what's the one thing you care about? Am I going to get paid back? And that's what they do.
Tim, I'm gonna go back to the very beginning, and I want to make sure that we covered what DSCR stood for. So debt service
coverage ratio. So what they basically, a 1-to-1, for example, would be if the property is $1,000 and it rents for $1,000, then that's a 1.0 ratio. If it rents for $1,250, that's a 1.25. Now, from our world, the funny part is the investors don't even think about our world, because our world cash flow, we don't take properties that only have a $250 a month positive cash flow, because one repair, you lose all your profits for the whole year. So our numbers that we work off of personally, and a lot, is we don't do anything less than 500 a month net positive. So for that same number, we're going to be in a 1.4, 1.5 or better, which is a premium rate. So they don't, as the higher your debt ratio or your debt service coverage ratio number gets, the better your rate gets. So that, and obviously the better your cash flow gets.
And so basically you're going to count that probable, that future cash flow, you're going to count that as income toward your loan. Is that correct?
The only thing on a debt service coverage ratio loan, the only thing they do is look at the subject property. They pull your credit report. You state your employment. You don't state that you make the dollar amount of money you make, and you state, and you put your assets, and they verify your assets. And some lenders will flex depending on experience level. So you may pay a higher premium or have a lower loan to value if you don't have experience in owning property. But their experience is, because a lot of people, like, they've maybe flipped one property or whatever. Well, that's experience if you can document it. So they literally take the property and say, all right, here's your payment. We're going to order an appraisal with a rent schedule. The appraisal with a rent schedule based on annual rental base. Some of them will do short-term rental. I wouldn't hold my breath that that's going to continue, because, especially this year, the short-term rental market's kind of softening a little bit because everybody traveling abroad. I don't know if you've seen that, but how many friends on Facebook are posting from Greece, they're all over the place. That's hurting the short-term rental market in the States, but everybody's expecting it to come back. But as a general rule, you don't base your numbers on best case scenario. You base it on worst case scenario. So worst case scenario, if short-term rental market goes away, your rents are $1,000. Will it cash flow based on the $1,000? And that's what they look at.
Do you have to show occupancy in that, or is it projected?
It depends on the investor. If it's a purchase, it can be projected.
Okay.
If it's a refi, it can be either or, depending on the investor. But if you've bought it and you showed that you were basically, so you bought, say you paid cash or borrowed private money on it and you did a rehab on it, and then obviously you're not going to have a tenant in there during the rehab, then they will default to the rent schedule that you get off the appraisal.
So am I correct, going back a half a step, that a 65 to 70% ratio is kind of what they're going to want to see? So they're going to want to see
on a loan to value
that you have 30 to 35% equity in that property walking into it.
Yeah, you can do less, but the rate, like say a rate on the 70 to 70 range is like, say, mid to low sevens, assuming that you're paying your own origination fees. If you start now, I would never let anybody, if anybody says, well, we'll do it lender pay, don't do that. because to get that broker paid, your rate would go from like low 7s to high 8s. So you're better off actually financing in that cost of origination, because it just costs way more over time. Kind of like the lenders that advertise, we pay your closing costs for you. The way they pay it is they jack your rate up. Same thing. So the debt service ratio, debt service coverage ratio loans, also known as DSCRs, you'll hear it in our world to just say DSCR. But it literally takes just into consideration the subject property. That's it.
Yep. Not your income. So you said earlier that it does not take into consideration. Obviously, you need to qualify from a credit worthiness standpoint. And what about assets? So we got a question from one of our longtime friends, Winston Covington, has asked, what kind of reserves do you need for a DSCR loan if you have several other properties? So if you already
that depends on each individual investor. Some are zero. Some will allow you, if you're doing a cash out, some allow you to use the cash out you're taking on the DSCR loan for the one that you just bought, rehabbed, and pulled the money out of. They'll allow you to use that as reserve. So it varies between each property. Some like a couple months, some like 6 months. Like you said, you need to, whoever you're dealing with on this type of product, they need to be versed in all of them. And it's going to change based on your experience level and your credit score and the investor that you end up with. All of those things come into play. The other thing you have to be careful of is, it's funny, if you buy a property too cheap, it can be a pain, because a lot of them will have a $75,000 minimum loan amount. Some of them have 100. So, and some of them have 150. So you just have, like I said, you have to have that balance of, okay, let's see what this deal is based on the parameters of this deal. This is what I should expect. So you need, on these type of things, when you have properties that you're looking at, you want to bounce them off the person that's going to be helping you with the financing. So, your exit strategy, whether it'll work or not. If it's going to be a hold, if it's going to be a fix and flip, it's a whole different thing. Or if it's going to be a wholesale, it's a different thing. But if you're talking about retaining the property, you need to, have that as a plan. Now, the other thing that I've done on some of mine as an investor, so take the lender hat off, put the investor hat on, is I've broken the golden rule. I've paid more than the house, more than I should for the property, because once the dust settles, I may have paid more than the property. Like, say I paid $8,000 more than the property was worth, but the property had an $800 a month net positive cash flow when the dust settled. And the only way I could get it was to pay $8,000 more. Okay, so in 10 months, I'm break even. Now I can buy that property and make the deal work, because the end game numbers work. Whereas another investor is saying, well, the numbers don't work. I don't have an exit strategy for it. I can't buy it. When you're doing it as a hold property, you have to analyze it all and then say, okay, here's the financing term. Once you learn the lending rules of the game, that gives you another, feather in your cap to be able to say, hey, if I do this, I can keep this one. And I'm not saying keep everything you buy. I mean, I would love to, but sometimes it's not reality. But if your end game is to like build your retirement portfolio and all you do is flip property, when you get done, all you do is have capital in the bank. You don't have anything, coming in. So if you say flip 2, keep 1, whatever works out to be whatever your scenario is. But if you use the debt service coverage ratio loan as a tool for you, there's really, I don't even deal with any other loan. They either go Fannie Mae or they go debt service coverage ratio loan, because anything else that's what they call in the non-QM world, where they would require you to document income, is at a higher rate than the debt service coverage ratio loan anyway. So why would I go through the headache of giving tax returns, income documentation, all this stuff, when it's literally the velocity of a debt service coverage ratio loan literally hinges on how fast the appraisal can be done.
And Tim, is it a fair statement to make that, let's just suppose that I'm on here and I'm a realtor, and I continue to run into deals along the way, and it generally happens. Here's an opportunity for me to potentially buy something, and it meets the requirements. It's got some good cash flow, and it meets all the ratios that you're talking about. Is it reasonable to do that as my first investment, to do it with a DSCR? And the reason I'm asking that is that I may not have income to back up any other kind of loan. This may be the only real way that I could do it. what kind of what kind of dollars do I have to be able to complete a loan like that?
Well, I mean, it all depends on how you're buying it. If you're buying it at a lower value, where say if you're using the old Mayo formula, you say, all right, we're purchase price minus repairs is what we're going to offer. I mean, like your 70% minus repair costs is, you know, ballpark what we're going to buy that property for. If you have you can go out and get a private loan to fill that void if you don't have the capital. When the dust settles, you do a cash out refi up to the 70 or 75%. I mean, if it makes sense for you to put more capital in your pocket, it doesn't kill the cash flow, pay the higher rate and take the money because it'll allow you to get the next property. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, the answer is yes, you can do it. It's just a matter of you have to structure the deal where you can. If you're coming to the table and saying, hey, I'm buying this at a discount, to do a purchase on a debt service coverage ratio loan, you put down the 20 or 20%, kind of like the minimum range. So you put down the 20% down in the interim. And then once you get it all fixed up, now the challenge is for these loans, they can't be a completely trashed home. It has to meet like the Fannie Freddie, realm of property. Can't be a total garbage dump, but it doesn't have to be a Taj Mahal either. It has to be livable as it sits and gives appraisal. So as long as the property meets the minimum standards for appraisal and the value's there for the purchase, so you purchase the property with the 20% down on a DSCR. Once you fix it up, you refinance it at the lower loan to value and get your capital back out.
So this really sounds like, for those of you that are listening, it sounds like a great opportunity to do kind of the BRRRR approach.
Exactly.
And there's a whole bunch of realtors on here and a bunch of investors, and DSCR is something that a lot of people haven't ever heard of before. And so real quick, Tim, I apologize for kind of stepping on your information, but I'm just seeing a lot of opportunities here. If you're a realtor and you've never gotten into the investment game, that you want to buy and hold property, absolutely amazing opportunity here, because I'm going to have Tim clarify this in a minute. It sounds like it's really not going to hit your credit too hard, as far as it's not going to count against you on future loan to values of future properties you're going to buy, because you could buy up to 10 of these using DSCR products, right, Tim?
Actually, there's depending on the investor, there's no 10 cap. It's usually dollar volume cap with the specific investor. So say I get a $5 million with this investor. Okay, I can't go with this investor anymore, but I can go with this one. So Fannie Mae has the 10 cap.
Yep.
The DSCR loans are private investor world. They don't have that same terms. In each one of them, they may have a dollar figure cap, or some of them may have a unit cap, but most of them have a dollar figure cap. Say, all right, we won't go more than like $5 million into you on these. But again, there's always flexibility. But like I said, there's this investor, and then there's say 5 or 6 other ones. So once you hit the cap on this one, then you got the other ones to fall back on, so you can keep going.
So basically, guys, if you've never done a BRRRR, in a case like this, if the property needs some repairs that someone like Tim or someone with a DSCR loan product can't do because it needs too many repairs, you get hard money, or you put cash into it. You fix the property up to the minimum that's gonna rent you a good amount, and then you move it over into a DSCR loan, and now you have a cash flowing property that in many cases, your cash, what you put in to begin with, you can take it right back out once you make it DSCR worthy. So if you guys are looking for buy and hold investments in addition to your flips, or in addition to your real estate listing opportunities, absolutely amazing way to go right here. And I've used DSCR loans before, and they're really powerful.
Hey, jargon guy, what's a BRRRR?
Buy, renovate, rent, and refinance.
There you go.
And then repeat.
And then repeat. Yeah, if you wanna make it a BRRRR, you repeat.
So a couple of people have asked that joined a bit later, who is this guy that's running his mouth off about mortgage lending, and does he know anything? I introduced Tim Tolbert at the beginning of our call. Tim has been my mortgage broker and financed everything I've done for the last couple of decades, and he's very, very knowledgeable about the mortgage space. He can pretty much help you with DSCR kind of lending almost anywhere in the country, and more conventional lending at current moment. I think you do what, Alabama, Georgia, Florida?
I'm in Florida, but our office does multiple states. And the nice part about it is me being a manager, I can kind of oversee if it's any state we're licensed in, I can kind of oversee it, make sure you get taken care of.
Right. So basically having him on primarily because any questions I ever have about lending, I always go to Tim. He's been my go-to guy forever on this. And we've been previous business partners and other things that we've done before. And, he's just my bud and agreed to come on. And this really came about because, and I'm going to ask you about this in the beginning, going forward, I don't think we have any hands in the air. This sort of started with you talk to me about 1031. You had some 1031 dollars you're trying to plant somewhere, but why don't you talk just a little bit about, I don't know if everybody who's on here even knows about 1031s as well.
Okay.
And talk about that just for a second.
Sure. So a 1031 is, in simple terms, is a way to avoid paying taxes on an investment property you're selling. So key one is you have to hold it for more than a year. And you can technically you can do it for less, but the threshold to prove it is a little more difficult. But if you figure easy rule of thumb is holding onto the asset for more than a year, you decide to sell it, and then you replace the asset with a like kind investment. There's some flexibility on like kind, but most of the time for us in the investment world, it's I'm buying another piece of property. That's a cash flow property because I'll give you an example of mine. I 1031 exchange one of my properties because I kind of felt that some people get that feeling that the property's like I'm at the top of this property and it's not, I don't think it's going to keep going up much because it's capped out in the neighborhood and the affordability yada. So I sold that one property. I sold it on a 1031 exchange. So which means I have 45 days to find or designate the next property or properties. So one of the things I did is, and I didn't complete the whole 1031 because I'm in Florida and I'm looking, and to me, I'd rather pay the taxes than make a wrong buy. So I bought one up in Georgia. I had a second when I was trying to get that deal fell through. So I spent $154,000 on a 1031 that I property up in Georgia. That's the one I'm currently, technically my wife is currently in the middle of refinancing, which we use that for another thing like estate planning. Half of them are in her name, half of them are in mine. So if something happens to one of us, legally, we only lose half our stuff instead of all of it. But that's a whole different call for you guys. But now I'm doing, so I sold the one property. I did a 1031 exchange to avoid taxes as much as possible. I'm still going to have a small tax bill because I didn't use all of the funds. But now I'm in the process of doing a DSCR to take $107,800 out. So by the time I get done, I'm figuring I'm going to net about 100,000 that now I can use to go buy two other properties as 20 or 30% down. So I took one property that was cash flowing at a $600 a month cash flow. I replaced it with the one when the dust settles with the DSCR in Georgia, my cash flow in that property will be $750. And then I have two more to buy. It's going to be somewhere in the $5 to $750 range. So I took a $600 cash flow. By the time the dust settles, it's going to be somewhere around $1,800.
Right.
And all you did was just shifting assets. That's why 1031 is a great tool. In a seller's market, it's a pain in the rear. I'll keep it clean. Well, I was talking with Tim, he'd expect me to say something else, but if we even have a crowd, I'll keep it clean.
My tender ears.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'd say is that, a lot of the folks on here are realtors. And part of the reason that I asked Tim on is that I think it's important. Certainly, we always encourage you to know and work with investors in your local marketplace. And the more you know about what pure investors are dealing with and what products are out there, the more knowledgeable you are. Yeah. It makes it much easier to work with an investor. So even if you're not looking to right now become one yourself, certainly important that you know what's cooking. For those of you who are investors and who need to work with somebody who understands our side of the business and can get you handled quickly, easily, and won't rob you blind in the process. Tim's a good buddy and he'll treat you well. And more importantly, he really is knowledgeable about it. And there's not much, I've never been able to ask him anything he didn't know the answer to. He could have been making it up. I wouldn't know, but for the most part, he seems to have pretty good knowledge about it. So I appreciate that. And I would ask if any of you have questions of anything that you have in regard to mortgage lending, it's a great time to ask them because it's a rare opportunity to talk to somebody who really is an industry professional. Tim, I'm going to ask you one more quick question.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of open it back up and let Bruce take back over again. In general, would you say that the lending climate is improving, getting better, getting easier to get people financed, getting worse? How do you see it right now?
In some areas, like Fannie Mae is kind of tightened up a little bit, but on the other product scheme is opened up. One thing I will say, and I think we discussed it the other day, is for those who are investors or realtors that are going to potentially be marketing to investors, one thing that's different between investors and owner occupants, investors for the most part aren't rate sensitive. So when rates climb, we actually are at an advantage because we're buying that property strictly on a cash flow kind of basis. So if the rate went up a half a point, I adjust my figures by that much and I make my offer. An owner occupant is payment sensitive and the media has them rate sensitive mentally. So what's happening is you're seeing a shift. There's I don't know what markets you're in, but Orlando market where I actually currently live, it used to be you'd have 20, 30 people offering on one property. Now it's 5 to 10. So it's slowed down in that aspect, but it's also because, there's, it's that time of year too. But we're still seeing properties fly off the market, but they're being more conservative. They're being more reserved. They're not asking 10 times what they should have been asking for. But one thing that's happening is by the market, constricting a little bit, it hasn't dropped in value any, but what it's done is it's giving more playing field to the investors, because now I'm willing to step in if the numbers work on a cash flow basis. The interest rate to me is irrelevant. I mean, to be honest with you, I've paid 18% on a cash flow property before because it made sense. I was making double my mortgage payment while I was waiting a year so I could refinance it based on Fannie Mae's terms off of appraised value. That was before the whole DSCR thing kicked in. I paid 18% for an entire year. I didn't care because that was my means to an end. And even so, at 18%, I was still making, say, $300 a month, knowing that when the year mark hit, I would be making $700-800 a month. So I mean, the interest rate from an investor's world is irrelevant if the numbers work.
Great. Well, I think that's important, and I think the real thing that all of us should be taking away from this, if you're a realtor, and there was a key element in what Tim just said, which is that while your potential direct home owner occupant buyers who are looking for properties are going to be more rate sensitive and watching the news and, is this a good time to buy, not a good time to buy, worried about rates and all of that, investors are significantly less so because they're looking at it on a cash flow basis. And that makes it even more critical that in your group, in your team, in the people that you assemble to help you build your business, you must have multiple investors to whom you can present properties that the rates aren't going to kill them. And if the rates get high, the individual home investors are going to slow down a bit and the investor side will pick back up. And you need to be able to balance that. That makes you a very smart realtor along with the process. And I think that's important. Tim, how would you like people to potentially reach out to you if they've got some mortgage needs and all that, if there's something that you can help them with? We had Jeff had asked if you had anybody recommend in California. I'm not going to ask you to respond directly to that, but how do you want them to reach out to you, bud?
The best thing for me is I give all my clients my cell phone. So if you have any questions, you can call me on the cell. It's 407-448-9188.
Okay.
Or you can literally Google my name. I own timtolbert.com, so it's really easy.
Yeah, don't Google the name on the Zoom screen. It's timtolbert.com.
Yeah, don't. Well, the other one, you'll get to my wife. She owns Andy Tolbert. So
Oh, great.
either way, you'll get to me. But
we just posted the link to timtolbert.com in the meeting chat. So it's right there for you.
so the other, and that, like I said, and my email is highly complicated, tim@timtolbert.com. It's really complicated.
So guys, real fast, I've had some questions pouring in, and some of them I'm a poor conduit to be able to pass along. If you were chatting me directly questions with regard to some of the things that Tim was talking about, if you're here live on Zoom, I'm going to ask that you raise your hand so that we can call on you and you can put the context around it. I don't want to mess up the transfer of your question to Tim, because they don't all perfectly make sense to me. Let's be real. So if you could raise your hand if you'd asked a question and you're here live, we will have you ask that question and Tim can answer it.
Well, and while they're doing that, quick note. There's two different types of investors. There's cash flow investors like myself, but there's also depreciation investors, like people that are high net earners that don't have any write-offs. They'll also pay full market for the property, even if it doesn't cash flow. They're happy with a net zero cash flow because the last thing they want is additional income. But they want the $10,000 to $15,000 a year in depreciation they get to write off.
Yes.
And then they get
And the equity growth.
paying off their property. So when they retire, they own the property free and clear.
Yes, absolutely. You guys, if you're unfamiliar with depreciation rules and the option of depreciating your assets and saving that tax money, please go make yourself aware of that. It's a powerful tool, even if there's not an unbelievable cash flow on your property.
Yeah,
that's good information. All
Bruce?
right. Any questions for Tim? I'm going to grab some while we're waiting on those. I am going to grab a few of the questions that have been chatted in, and they may or may not relate to you, Tim.
Okay.
So I'm just going to hit a few of them. Ryan had said that he had a great year this past year and has added probate as a spoke and started a 3-step probate campaign, and he's curious what the message delivery looks like on a probate phone call. So what does that messaging look like on the phone call? And there's really 2 different ways to deliver that messaging. You can start with the most simple way, and the simple way, Ryan, is going to be, hey, I'm calling because I work with families going through probate, and really specifically those that have inherited real estate. I was curious, once probate is over, was your family thinking about selling the property or holding on to that property? Now, there's a reason that I use once probate is over, and it's not because you need to wait till probate's over to buy or list that property. It's because it's really low pressure, and it gives people the feeling that they can give you a more honest answer because it's low pressure. Okay, you can absolutely go out and list that property tomorrow, whether it's in probate or not. But I want to get an honest answer first. So that's a very direct approach. It's real estate forward and centered. I had a business partner that used that approach brilliantly. It doesn't work for me a whole lot. And the reason that it doesn't work for me is because I run into people that I think get a little bit sensitive. They're going through a time when they've just lost someone, and all of a sudden you're calling with a very forward, aggressive message that's talking about capitalizing and making money on their loss. And some people tend to be a little tender around that topic in the beginning. So normally I'm going to call and offer kind of a turnkey type of service where I can help you with your entire probate process. I'll get to the point of their answer. Sometimes it's resistance, and then I will pivot that conversation to real estate later. So let's pretend that they just said, no, I don't need anything. That's great. Do you mind if I ask, once probate's over, was there any real estate involved? So then you move to the real estate topic after you've conceded whatever resistance, you've conceded to the objection that they gave you in the beginning. So that's the basics of it. There's an entire 6-hour class that we're right in the middle of right now that kind of breaks apart all the different influence techniques on that. I'll encourage you to maybe join that next month. We're going to do it next month, and be on the lookout for that. It's packed with role play and different things, and a bunch of people here are in that class this week. So, but that's the gist of it. Should you wait until after your letters drop? Yes. Some people do, some people don't. I can tell you if your letters drop ahead of time, it gives you a really good talking point. Hey, you may have gotten a letter from me in the last couple of days. It's the one in the blue envelope. Have you opened that yet? Okay, so it's just a talking point, a frame of reference for your call. You certainly don't have to wait, but it is a good practice to call behind a letter that drops. All right. Scott Wetzel has his hand up. Scott, go ahead.
Hi, Bruce, Tim, and Tim. Hey, quick question for you. Running off your direction or advice in regards to taxes and tax write-off, where would the three of you recommend finding an appropriate tax advisor for that? Is it state specific? Look at Tim, he's smiling over there. I'm sorry, Andy, Tim. Now Tim's smiling. Is it state specific? Are you better off looking in your state of origin or the property state of origin if it's different than yours? All encompassing.
All encompassing. Yes. It should be. It's
Yes, good answer.
It's not state specific. However, your state could put their hands in the pot a little bit. So I would look for someone in your state. The majority of this is going to be along the lines of what the step-up tax is going to be. So one of the first things that someone should do if they're going through probate is they should get an accurate and current evaluation of all the property involved, including the real estate, as soon as possible. They don't do this very often. Many times they put it off and then they have to go back and try to figure out in an appreciating or depreciating market what the property was worth 9 months ago when their loved one passed away. So they should be evaluating things really quickly. And then you should probably have a local accountant that can help with that, which, by the way, this really gives you a great talking point when you're on the phone or you're sending marketing out is, have you gotten your appraisal of the property yet? Or have you done an evaluation of your estate yet? It's something that I offer for free. And you don't have to offer it for free. It's just kind of a loss leader from me. And people go, no, the court hasn't asked me for that. Well, of course, the court hasn't asked for it, but it's something that's going to help them simplify when they go to close the estate out to figure out what kind of taxes are owed. So it's a great talking point for you if you catch people early in the process.
But I'd also say, are you a member of the local RIA where you are?
No, I am not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good place for you to cruise around and potentially find out who the successful investors are in that RIA, and they'll become pretty obvious to you at the breaks. They're the ones that usually have people crowding around them and, asking them questions and in the conversations. And certainly it's a good question to ask at a RIA meeting. And if you're going to be, a serious player in the real estate community where you are investor wise, you probably should, at least in the beginning, make a good habit out of going to those meetings. You'll also find out things that you just won't learn elsewhere. I know that Tim Tolbert has been involved in the Orlando RIA community for a very long period of time. It's actually kind of where we met and around that side of it. So certainly that's a good place to get that question answered on a more localized basis.
Yeah, and
I've been to a few. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, and one thing, if you're in an area, because not all areas have them. I mean, North Georgia doesn't have one. I mean, it doesn't even, the closest one's in Atlanta to North Georgia. But another thing that's really important when you're dealing with, accountants and stuff like that in the real estate realm is make sure that if you ask your accountant about, hey, I'm thinking of doing this in real estate, and they cringe, you probably want to find another accountant.
Yeah.
Because that means they don't stay current. They don't like it. So they don't stay current on all the abilities for deductions and all that stuff. So you want somebody that's going to be working in your favor on that aspect. That's going to help you and guide you through decisions that you're going to rely on them on. Because if they don't stay on top of it, they can cost you a lot of money down the line, because either you weren't taking a deduction that you could, or you were mistakenly doing something that's going to cost you in an audit down the line. And then I like Bruce's message on the probate side. A lot of when you're dealing with the probate side, I know in Florida it's acceptable versus getting an appraisal. A lot of them will use a broker's price opinion supported, or CMA, or whatever you want to call it, in your area, because not all of them are in the same area called the same. A lot of them will accept that as a valuation for the probate.
Okay. I think for the RIA part, I might have to shop around. I've been to a few, and I just felt I had to take a shower when I walked out. No offense against the wholesalers, but they're a little slippery at times.
No, of course not.
Yeah, you find that in every industry.
By the
Yeah.
way, I'm gonna point out 2 words that you said there. With that is you said at times. We've got some pretty ethical people that wholesale on this call.
Yes.
But those of you that wholesale on this call, you guys are the ethical ones. Recognize that that there are plenty of unethical slippery wholesalers out there. Don't be like them.
Yeah, and it's nothing against the ethical one. I'm a broker agent, and I've dealt with everybody, and just sometimes,
Yeah.
it's real estate side too. For you wholesalers,
Sure.
there's a lot of questionable realtors.
Like
Well,
Bruce said, it doesn't matter
sorry.
what industry you're in, you're going to find good people and bad people. I
Yeah.
think the point is that in general, and a lot of this.
So shop it.
Yeah, it also has a tendency to be how the actual group itself is constituted, and are the people that are running that. Every RIA's got people that drive the bus. And if the folks that drive the bus encourage ethics and integrity, then you're going to find good people there. And I think you just kind of have to look around and see what you find. But certainly shop around is the right answer, and ask questions. Ask them about, how does a 1031 affect my status? Should I be looking to do this? Ask them questions based on what you heard here. If they don't know what you're talking about, keep moving until you find one that does.
Yeah. And from a lending standpoint, I review, countless business and personal tax returns all the time. And one of my good friends that, I've partnered with him on properties before, and his accountant was not, this guy makes a good chunk of money, and had no intention of selling the properties. But his accountant never took, I looked at 3 years worth of tax returns, didn't have a single itemized deduction for depreciation on multiple properties.
Wow.
He fired his CPA after that, because that CPA cost him about $15,000 in taxes a year, because they weren't taking depreciation. So, and sometimes, honestly, going to the wholesalers and sometimes getting the slimy feeling, sometimes it's not that they, it's that they don't have all the information. I had one come across the Facebook feed the other day, and they were talking about how they've got a deal that you can assume and all this stuff. And the underlying loan was a reverse mortgage. And they said, well, the original loan amount is this. And it's like, I said, do you know how old the loan is? So when they were building their parameters, they were using the original loan amount, forgetting the part that a reverse mortgage is a negative amortization loan. So they're running, hey, you're going to make this. And they're using the original principal balance, because they didn't have the knowledge that a reverse that was taken out 10 years ago for $100,000 might be $150,000 or $160,000 now.
Right.
So it's just sometimes just lack of knowledge. They just, and don't get me wrong, I'd rather them go out fully motivated and make a mistake, at least doing something, than and all I did was like, I didn't post anything on Facebook. I literally just private messaged them. Actually, it happened to be one that I knew personally. We taught him before. I just sent him a text and I said, hey, you need to amend this to cover your rear end, because what you're stating is not completely accurate, because it's a reverse mortgage is a negative amortization loan. If you want the accurate figure, you need to ask them for a payoff.
So guys,
Okay.
I first off, Tim, I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been one of the more in-depth looks into a topic that we've had, and probably going to ask you back sooner rather than
Anytime.
later. Good stuff to learn here, and that's been important. I think the other thing I was going to tell you is that as a group, I'm sure everybody appreciates it, and please feel free to reach out directly to Tim, and he'll be happy to work with you, point you in the right direction. And if you don't hear anything back from him, you can yell at me and I'll yell at him, or actually I'll yell at Andy and Andy will yell at Tim, because she likes him to make money. So that always works out well.
No,
Bruce,
I'm one of the weird people that actually answers a phone call when you call.
he does indeed do that. No matter where he's doing, a lot
What
of
a
the time,
creep.
it's like, there's Tim, and he's driving and down the side of a hill in Jeep. Bruce, I know you had other questions we wanted to get to, and if you'll make sure we get those answered offline, we can do that. But I know we're being sensitive to your timeline. We got to get you off so you can teach the class. And we're literally at the top of the hour. We got a minute left. You want to offer any good closing remarks and send everybody off on their way?
All right, I'm going to do my best, since Tim offered such an amazing opening without his partner Jim on the call. I'm going to do my best to try to do justice to Jim's closing, and thank everyone for being here. Thank those of you who contributed, ask your questions, and challenge you guys to take one idea and one thing that you learned today, implement it in your business, and come back and share your results next week. Same time, Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific. You do the math if you're not Pacific or Eastern time. But appreciate everybody being here.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye now.